So let's look at things from a reader's perspective. In this episode, I want to reverse the roles basically. Often we as authors are so close to the manuscript and to our book in general that it's very hard to actually see the end result and what actually the readers are going to love and like and share, for instance. So let me share with you a small little story about an author that came to us about 3-4 months ago. Let's name her Sandra. So Sandra was an author who came to us, to Cutting Edge Studio, for help with cover design, formatting, and some other services. She had already had her ducks in a row. We already sent her our questionnaire. We invited to a client portal. We connected her with our designers, and we're basically ready to rock and roll. Now, what happened is that we worked simultaneously on the cover and the formatting. The cover designer created 3 or 4 mock-ups and sent it over to her, and she was very enthusiastic from the get-go. She loved the second cover design the most, and she just asked for a few little tweaks here and there. So I must say within 3 or 4 days, she actually already had the cover of her dreams initially. Same thing with the formatting. The formatting went by pretty quickly. Within 2 or 3 days, we had the initial design on paper for her, sent it over. She had a few little tweaks on this, and that was basically it. So, all good, you should say. But after that, she started to have some doubts. We almost finalized the cover, and then she suddenly sent us a message, hey, can you resend the other designs that you created for us for the covers, the other mock-ups, and can I post that on social media, because I want to get some ideas and thoughts on these covers from fellow authors, potential readers, friends, family, etc. Now, let me point this out to you that putting these things up to social media can actually be a great idea. I mean, sometimes you're so stuck to your own idea that it's actually a great idea to have other people giving their advice and tips and tricks about things like cover design or formatting or whatever, and let them know what they love. The downside, however, is that generally when you upload 3 covers to like Facebook, for instance, a certain amount of percentage is gonna like the first one, others gonna like the second one, and others gonna like the third one. So bringing a conclusive result is often very, very hard. And then what happened is, actually that happened. So like, let's say a quarter like the first one, a quarter like the second one, the third one, and I believe she even had a fourth one, I'm not sure. And then she had some doubts. And then what she did, she actually went into a manuscript and really opened up the cover design and really see if things matched. So, for instance, she sent us back a long email with, yeah, but the eyes on the cover of the main character, and now they are blue, but in my book they actually are green. And one person on Facebook pointed that out, and one of my beta readers pointed that out. Can you make that change? The hair, it's blonde, but it's not that blonde. Can you use a different horse? I mean, I like that horse, but I still want to have a different one because in my book, well, you get where I'm going to. And although we are happy to make those changes, and we eventually did, the more a designer gets working on a cover and really needs to make all those small little tweaks, often it's not for the good of the cover. Keep in mind that a cover design only has 2 jobs. It needs to look professional and it needs to look genre. But what's actually on the cover doesn't really matter. What color eyes are, what color hair is. And of course, we as an author, we find that very, very important because we have a certain vision, right? Not alone for the cover, but also for your book in general. So it's very hard to let that go. But if you get multiple covers and one of them is really, really good and can help you sell a lot of copies, but small details like things like color or different color of hair or whatever, or eyes, and if we're not able to change that, it doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing. And why? And that's why I bring this up in today's subject. A reader probably won't even notice. And if he does notice, he probably won't even care. A reader buys a book for the story, and of course a cover will help you sell that book. Also, a cover design is very important. But again, if the cover looks professional and it looks genre, people will buy it, and as soon as they already have it, they don't really mind the color of an eye or a different kind of hair or whatever, as long as it's not too different. So to a certain extent, I can imagine why she wants to have those changes. Same thing with the formatting. So inside of the formatting, when we sent it back to her, it was actually a fiction novel, so it was a very easy one to format, because in generally those are just text. Like nonfiction often have things like bullet points, images, graphs, charts, footnotes. So those tend to take a little bit more time. But fiction is generally for a formatter pretty easy and pretty fast to format. But even so, Sandra really wanted certain images on certain places in the manuscript. And not so much images, but more like graphics. And we did. We added that to her, but to the manuscript. But then she did the same thing. So she uploaded it to social media, or a portion to it, to get some feedback. And then she came back with us with a long list from, yeah, but that image needs to be a little bit different. I can change this and can change that. Now, let me be very clear. I mean, if you send images yourself, so maybe you work with an illustrator and you get the illustrator to really pinpoint your ideas, then no problem at all. We just insert those images and then we're done with it. But for a formatter, it's not a formatter job to actually create images. Some of them can, but some of them can't. I mean, formatter job is the interior design, but with the interior design, it's not creating images from scratch. It's just putting everything together, basically. So keep that in mind. But for this same reason, a reader doesn't really care what type of image is in there. I mean, to give an example, she wanted to get some sort of specific image from a sword. And that sword needs to be very, very specific. Like, I don't know, like a sword that somebody would use down in the 5th century, something like that. Well, first of all, a lot of authors don't know how a sword looks like that is specific to a certain event or a certain time period. As long as they see a sword and it looks neat and it looks cool in the manuscript, it's, yeah, cool, looks nice, and then they read on to the rest of the story. But for you as an author, it might be more important. So my advice is always, and that's why I bring this up, and that's why we choose this topic on this today's session, is you as an author, as a self-publishing author especially, you already have a lot of things on your mind. And publishing and marketing can be so overwhelming. So do yourself a favor and don't stress too much about all the details. And if you do stress about those things, just flip it around. Ask yourself, hey, if I'm a reader, if I'm my target audience, if I would see this cover or see this image or see the way that the book is formatted, would I really mind if an image is a little bit different than it actually says in the book, for instance, or in general? Would I really mind that? Or would I just want to make sure that I actually enjoy the story? I mean, that's the most important thing, right? Especially for a fiction author. Now, for non-fiction, it's basically the same advice I want to give you. Although I can imagine that with non-fiction, you have certain graphs and images, or maybe even if you run a business, some sort of business brand or colors you want to add to it. That makes it a little bit more important that the formatter and the cover designer get that right. But even still, you can go to the Knit and Picky as much as you want and only publish that book like weeks later. Because that's what eventually happened with Sandra. Because we made all those changes because that's our job. We love helping out, and if you're telling us from, hey, can you please make this change and that change? Of course we'll do that. We always give the advice from, hey, we can, but I'm not sure if it's the end result may not be as good as the one we have right now, but hey, let's give it a go and see what happens. And if you're happy with that next version, then we go with that. So for us, it doesn't really matter. And the whole reason why we give this advice to you is just for you, not for us. Again, for us, we don't really mind. But if you are going to the nitpicky and really dive in all these small details in your publishing journey, it can give you a lot of stress, but also your window of publishing will be way longer. So especially if you have like a launch date in mind already, maybe even share to the world when your book's going to be live. If you don't have all those files yet and you keep going back and forth with all these small little things, you might actually be hurting yourself and your launch. Because then what happens is that you send a revision back or a request for a revision back, and then the cover designer or formatter might not have an availability right away that same day to make a change. Sometimes they need a few days to bring you back in the schedule and make that change for you and upload a new file. But if we go back and forth a few times that way, then you can see that it will postpone your launch as well. Having that said, it's always a good idea to not actually have a launch day or date when you actually are still working on your files. We actually work with a lot of authors who already have a certain day in mind. So when they send us their manuscript and their cover ideas, etc., they say yes, and in 4 weeks this needs to be live. And so 4 weeks, or sometimes even 2 weeks, or sometimes even a week, this needs to be ready. Because not everybody knows how long a service like cover designer, formatting, or whatever service out there might take. So my advice is always just to make sure you don't stress out too much. Make sure you don't have a publishing date. So the best way to publish your book, self-publish your book without any stress, is work with a company you can trust. Listen a little bit to the advice of the designers, because you're outsourcing it to a professional for a reason. So do trust them a little bit when they give some advice. But also wait until you have everything, all the files stored on your computer before you actually send out to the world when your book is going to be live. So what I normally do, I work with my designers for my latest book, for instance. I wait until I have the cover design, the book description, keywords, categories, formatting, and everything else stored on my computer. I even already started on my marketing idea and thoughts about marketing and plan, etc. So I already have all those files stored on my computer. And on the day I have that, I calculate 4 weeks later, and that roughly is my launch date. Sometimes you need to see if that's not on a specific day, like a holiday or something like that, because that might not always be convenient to launch your book on a holiday. It might be, depending on your book. But roughly 4 weeks after you have all the files in your computer, that's your launch date. Because then you have 4 weeks to upload everything, make sure there are no errors, especially if you're working with Amazon or Ingram. Those companies are notorious for still giving some errors, even if everything is checked, even if the designers use their own templates. So upload everything already, make sure that there are no errors, and then have a marketing plan ready. And then you basically have 4 weeks to tweak that marketing plan, to build your launch team, to send out the PDF so your launch team can actually review it or read it and prepare a review for you. And have all those other ducks in a row. Trust me, if you publish like that, you won't have any stress. Everything will work out very neatly. So again, if you have any questions and concern about, hey, my cover design, my formatting, or whatever, is that good enough? Try to look at it from a different perspective. Try to look at it from a reader's point of view and not so much as an author's point of view. Well, that was it for this session. I hope it was very helpful. Check our other sessions out and the next podcast, and I see you guys soon.